Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and it's a great honor for me to do this today with my friend Steve, who's really needs no introduction, but I will just give a little bit of a personal anecdote to start, which is when I started in a couple careers ago in New York, I really learned a lot in New York real estate, which is probably one of the toughest businesses and one of the toughest environments in the world. And I went there as a young guy, and I really tried to learn from all of the greats in New York, and it really is a bunch of luminaries who have done incredible things to build the skyline. It's a very competitive sport, and Steve was one of the people I looked up to. And I would always see whenever there would be these great deals done, it was always Steve. He figured out how to pull together the One High Line, which was an incredible deal, and 150 Charles Street, which always broke records. And then he came down to Miami and did the Shore Club, which was incredible, and Shell Bay. So I always knew Steve as an incredible deal maker, an incredible visionary. And then he decided to go for this next term for President Trump into really the next level of deal making. So President Trump could not have gotten a better person, a better friend, and a more incredible deal maker. So really an honor to be with Steve and have him doing this job and be with him today. So let's welcome him. Thank you. So Steve just got back from Russia, and he was we're very thankful that you were able to bring back Mark Fogel, an American who was held there. Maybe start by telling everyone how you were able to make that happen.
Well, first of all, it all begins, as you know, Jared, because you work for him, it all begins with your father-in-law. He sets the table. I'm not just saying it, but peace through strength, that's what dictates releases like Mark Fogel. We got to reach out from someone in Russia who you know, Kirill, and that was in part engineered, or in large part engineered by His Highness MBS in Saudi Arabia, and also Dr. Masood, and also Princess Remer, who I see right over here. And they were terrific, and they felt that there could be a compelling meeting in Russia that might lead to the release of Mark Fogel. And it actually happened. We got off the plane. I think we were not sure it was going to happen, and it did. And I think it had a lot of knock-on effect. I would think that it was a show of good faith on the part of President Putin. Our president, Trump, had a conversation with President Putin after this release, and it's led to a lot of positivity. So hopefully it will have a large impact on a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, so I'll have two questions on that, but the first one is, coming from the business world, which is, I think, a very natural way to go into politics, but it's not the ordinary course. But knowing to get on a plane, go to Russia, who to trust, who not to trust, how do you feel like you're able to navigate that and to have instincts on whether to pursue? Because these things do come with risks, right? You could have gone there and you could have come back with nothing, and it could have been embarrassing. And there's a lot of people who are very quick to criticize in politics. What made you feel confident to do that, and how were you able to pull it off when you were there?
Well, first I had the support of President Trump, which is a really big deal. Secondly, we have a really good relationship with the Saudis. And Princess Remer is an amazing ambassador. Dr. Masood is incredible. His Highness is incredible. They assured us that this was real, that there was real validity to Kirill and what he was saying could happen here. And so to me, it became worth the trip. And so we went, and it was a great trip. I spent, a lot of time with President Putin, talking, developing a friendship, a relationship with him. And that led to Mark getting on the plane. And Mark getting on the plane was momentous. We got to the airport, he was jumping, and he was so happy, couldn't even believe it. And we touched down at Andrews, big snowstorm. And I said, Mark, you're on U.S. soil now. There's no turning back. And he spoke to his 97-year-old mother on the plane, his wife, his two children. It felt like I was doing something really consequential. And you did this, and so you know how it can make you feel. It makes you feel like you're doing something larger than yourself.
So you've now met in Russia, and then you just came back from Saudi Arabia, where you had also high-level meetings. Obviously, I saw that the press is always, you have a lot of critics, you have a lot of people with ideas. What's your perspective, having sat now in the room and hearing those perspectives, on what you think is possible, and to whatever degree you're willing to give a time frame for how long you think it will take to develop these ideas. And I will just caveat that by saying this thing's been going on for a long time. It's very emotional for people. These are very hard things to resolve, but it feels like for the first time since this war started that there is a real effort that has a chance to bring a breakthrough to end the war.
Well, first of all, it's what you talk about. You set the you began this whole thing in the first Trump administration, and you were so successful. And I think the secret sauce is correcting miscommunication and creating good communication. And you did it so well, and that's how you began the. That's how you and President Trump created the Abraham Peace Accords. And so I think, with regard to what it was like in Saudi, I think the beginning of that meeting felt a little bit. What word do I want to use? I want to choose my words carefully on this one. It felt a little bit pro forma. Mm-hmm. And I think as both sides began to realize that we were there on a trust-building mission, and we were there to explore how we might get some sort of deal done in time, I think everybody got very comfortable with one another, and we all walked away thinking, wow, this was a transformational meeting. Now, you're right. Then you listen to the media, and of course, it's misportrayed. And that becomes somewhat amusing. And then I have to take the advice from you, which is always, don't care about the media. So that's liberating, because I have you, the Rebbe, telling me that.
It's true. So you still have a very successful business that your sons now are running, who you've trained very well. Again, I know this because, again, I be at the country club that you built, which is spectacular. By the way, my sons would ask Steve, how do you make money there with all the free ice cream you give out? And so he had to explain to them the business model over dinner. It was a very interesting conversation. But you had a great life, living in Florida. We've been fishing together. We've done a lot of things here. But you've chosen to put that on hold and to step away and forego that opportunity with your amazing business in order to go and try to serve the country, work with President Trump to tackle some of these impossible and intractable problems. Why did you decide to do it?
Because you convinced me. And he did, by the way. I think it was sort of clever on your part, insidiously clever. But it's something that's so worthy and so consequential, and you realize that with good communication skills, you can actually have a positive impact on some of these situations. I get calls and emails and texts every single day from hostage families on both sides. And I've made great relationships out there with the Saudis, with the Emiratis, with Sheikh Mohammed, who I say all the time has been so consequential in all of this. And I know you have friendships with them too. For me, it's a blessing. I feel like I'm privileged. I get to do something that I never thought First, I never thought that I would ever be. I thought I'd be a lawyer for the rest of my life, and then I got to be in the real estate business, and one of my mentors was Donald Trump, and now I get to work for him, and he's a special man to work for. He really is. I'm excited when I wake up in the morning, looking at my texts and my emails, and so it feels very consequential for me.
So your first real negotiation when you started in this, you didn't even wait till you got into government. It was actually pretty impressive how you were able to build a relationship with the Biden team and everyone, and it felt like they just sucked you right into the vortex, even during transition, which is very unusual. Yeah. And you had a very successful negotiation in order to get several dozen hostages released, which, again, even just one is a life saved, and I know that it's really touched you, and I know you brought intense passion and work to do that. What's been your observation so far about your first government negotiations, and why do you think the first phase was successful? And then I'll ask you about where you think we're going with the next phase of the negotiations.
So I just think that they were talking past one another in that first phase. And the real estate business, it's like a closing at the table. You've got to get people talking to each other and with each other. And there were built-in barriers to getting a deal done. For instance, Hamas is not at the table. They don't want to be at the table with the Israelis don't want to be at the table with them. You tell me how you bring that together when people don't want to sit at the same table with each other. So that never changed, by the way. Hamas would come, they would be at the floor below, the sheikh would go downstairs, he would talk to them, come back upstairs. It's not easy to work in an environment like that, but ultimately I think we were able together. Brett McGurk was great for the Biden administration. We worked collaboratively. We were able to convince people that a hostage release was a good thing. It was good for everybody. It was good because there were going to be Palestinians released going home to their families. So the more we communicated, the more compelling it became, and then ultimately we were successful.
And so as you see that going into the next phase, you built a lot of momentum. There's ongoing discussions. What can people expect over the next week, 30 days, 60 days with regards to that situation?
Well, I hope a lot of the goodwill from the first phase carries over to phase two, because there's a lot of families who have children there who are held hostage. And it's, for me, I have a lot of empathy because I lost a child. So I talk to these families who have lost children, and they want their children's bodies back as much as the families who have children who are alive. But I think phase two is more difficult. But I think ultimately, if we work hard, then there's a real chance of success. I think everybody is buying into this notion that releasing hostages is just a good thing. It just is something that's important and that ought to happen. The issue with phase two is that there's supposed to be an end to the war as part of phase two. And I think the Israelis have a red line, which is you can't have Hamas in the government. And so it's hard to sort of square that circle. But we're making a lot of progress in the conversations, and hopefully it will lead to some good things, good results.
So there's been more success in your diplomacy in your first 30 days of service than most diplomats achieve in a lifetime, right? Taking two situations that were basically stuck in the mud, and now you've breathed life into it. And again, it could go in a lot of different pathways. As you know from transactions, you've done hundreds, if not thousands, of deals in your life.
Yeah.
How do you see things playing out with Gaza? And right now, the president made a statement the other day, about a week ago, where he put something out that was a departure from how people were thinking. And I personally was saying to myself, one of the rules that I had when I was working in the Middle East is that if people aren't screaming at you, then you're not on the right track. Yeah. And so that definitely brought a chorus. And so my question for you is, what do you see as the big issues that need to be resolved once you're through with the hostages? And how do you see that playing out?
Well, first of all, in typical fashion, the president said some things, and again, it got misconstrued. The basic premise of what he was talking about in Gaza was that why should we try a solution that hasn't worked for the last 50 years? That makes no sense. And when I went to Gaza, and I think someone told me I was the first American official who went there in 22 years. It made no sense to me that you were there in charge of trying to formulate a development plan for Gaza, and you didn't see it. And when you see it and the utter devastation there, you realize that this is not something that can be completed in 5 years. The underlying May 27th Accord that sets the parameters pursuant to which Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3, the reconstruction happened, was based on a 5-year redevelopment plan for Gaza. It's not physically possible. So you can't develop an apartment building in Manhattan in 5 years, and you have to see what the devastation that exists there today in Gaza. There are 30,000 unexploded shells all over there. The conditions are horrendous. I don't know how people can move in there. The buildings are all listing. There's nothing standing up in a good way. And it's going to take a lot of cleanup and imagination and a great master plan. And that doesn't mean that we're on an eviction plan when the president talks about this. It means that he wants to shake up everybody's thinking and think about what is compelling for that area and what is the best solution for the Palestinian and Gazan people who live there. For instance, do they want to live there? Do they want to live in a home there, or would they rather have an opportunity to resettle in some sort of better place, have jobs, upside financial prospects. And I think what's happened from the president talking like this is that he's engendered a discussion throughout the entire Arab world about different types of solutions that before he talked about this, people would have never considered. And I think that's a good thing. And you and I talk about this. We talk about convening people together from all parts of the world, and master planners and developers and architects, and talking about ideas and so forth. And that's what the president's, that's what his views on this have created an impetus for. So I think it's really a healthy thing.
Yeah, so final question, which is, the two reasons that I was very excited about your willingness to do this was, number one, you come from a background of negotiations and transactions and deals, which is much different than diplomacy. And then number two, which I think is also very important, is economic development, creating things, dreaming things, building things, creating jobs, giving people livelihoods instead of trying to litigate old problems and whack things up that don't have much value. So economic development, which is really what a lot of we're here to talk about at this conference, which is how do you have the right governance structures, how do you make the right investments in order to create jobs, improve people's lives. That's really been the thematic of this. How important is that now that you've been seeing this for just a short period? How important are you seeing economic development and the potential for people to have livelihoods in the diplomacy you're doing? And what's been different relative to the expectations you had when you started?
Well, I think it's critical. I mean, it's the linchpin of this all. I mean, it's all about living a better life. And, I think in Gaza, we're so focused on the land, I think we've changed the discussion now, and we're talking about what does a better life mean for people. And with a better life, with this sort of aspirational opportunity, then maybe things do fundamentally change. I think that you get radical behavior, you get terrorism when all hope is lost. And I think hope emanates from being able to earn a living, seeing a better future for your children. I sat in Gaza with a bulletproof vest on looking at the scenery there, Jared, and I don't know why anyone would want to live there today. It's illogical to me. Doesn't mean, by the way, that you can't have some sort of right to return if that's the policy prescription that works for people. But to me, if it was my kids, I'd want to know that there was a future for them, that they could become a lawyer or a doctor, an engineer, do something that makes their life better than mine was, if that was me living there. And I think that economic development is critical. It's what's happening all over Saudi Arabia today. Look at Saudi Arabia. It's a whole different country than it was 20 years ago. And that's all because of a vision from His Highness and what he's creating there, hyperscale data centers, robotics, blockchain, all the rest of it, moving that economy from an oil-based economy to a very multifaceted economy. Everybody's got opportunity there. I look at that, at the Saudi marketplace, I say I think it's going to become one of the most investable real estate marketplaces in the world as people begin to see the upside in what's happening there.
So I just want to thank, on behalf of myself, my family, a lot of people here, I want to thank you and President Trump for the amazing work you guys have done already. It's been very frustrating the last couple of years to watch all of these terrible things happen in the world and know that people were not solving them, or at least putting in the efforts. One observation I have about government is that when you're in the private sector, all the speakers you've heard here, they're aiming for impossible things. You have entrepreneurs, they say, I want to go to Mars. We celebrate that in the business community. In the government community, people set small goals, and then they're criticized when they don't achieve those goals. I really appreciate that you guys are trying to solve the big problems. You're risking your time, your effort, your reputations to do it. And so far, I just couldn't be more thrilled and grateful for all the great progress you guys have made. So really our gratitude and appreciation and respect, and just thank you so much.
Thank you.